Hey Hedgehogs, it's Paul Scheider. Today I'm going to start talking about some of the different components that go into setting up a primitive wilderness survival camp. And before I dive into the main topic, I just want to mention that this is one of my favorite things to do in all of the different practices that are inside the skill set of wilderness survival. Because setting up a primitive survival camp is really where all of the different skills converge together. And I actually find it to be almost a spiritual experience because you're out in the woods, you have found a place that really fits your needs for survival, it has a good energy to it, and then you just start going to work on creating all the different things that it's going to take to sustain life and comfort in that area. And I really enjoy that because I get all into the little details of what it's going to take. And most importantly, it gives me a lot of space and time to reflect on the fact that being out in the woods is such a nice thing because it makes me realize how little I actually need, because most of what I do need is right there around me in the woods. And that gives me a lot of contentment, and I'm sure it does for a lot of you out there that enjoy these skills too. But anyway, the physical skill that I'm going to show you today is how to lash a tripod together properly. And tripods have so many different uses in wilderness survival, particularly if you're setting up a long-term camp, because you can do a lot of different stuff with them, like hanging a pot over a fire for cooking. You can smoke meats with them. You can use a tripod as a backrest, a component in a lift pull trap for catching animals. You can use them as shelter components, and so many other things. You're really only limited by your imagination. The first thing that you're going to need for your tripod is going to be 3 wooden posts. These are some that I've collected from the surrounding forests, and ideally you want them to be about the same diameter. They can be any length that you want because the technique I'm going to show you will work for tripods of any size. This is going to be a medium-sized one. And so you want them to be about the same size from end to end if you want a tripod that stands up evenly. The other thing to keep in mind that's very important, for the sake of conservation, be sure to use a tree that's already fallen over, because there's really no reason to harvest a healthy live tree, because the tripod will work just as well with wood that's already dead, and it will allow the ecosystem in your forest to stay as intact as possible. The next essential element for making a tripod is to have some cordage. And cordage can be anything from parachute cord to natural twine. Today I'm going to be using natural jute twine, J-U-T-E. You'll see me using this in a lot of different applications with the wilderness survival skills. I like it a lot for a couple of different reasons. Number one, it very closely mimics the type of cordage that you would make if you were to make cordage from the resources in the wilderness itself. And the other reason I like it is because it's very cheap, it's plentiful, and it's widely available at a lot of different hardware stores and craft stores all over the place. But one of the very, very nice things about it, and probably the most important thing, is that jute twine, because it's natural, will biodegrade, which is a great thing because if I accidentally leave some of this behind, or if I intentionally leave some of this behind in a shelter that I'm going to use over a long period of time, I can rest assured that it will biodegrade and decompose over time, and I don't have to worry about littering up the woods. Now we're ready to start lashing the tripod, and the first thing that we're going to do is tie a clove hitch knot. The easiest way to remember how to tie a clove hitch knot is to make 2 loops, and you start by going right over left, and you make another loop by going right over left, so that you have 2 loops side by side, and then you take right and put it behind left. So right over left, right behind left, and then when you have these 2 loops together, you have a formed clove hitch. And what you do is you take that and you slip it over the end of the pole, and you pull the 2 ends tight, and your clove hitch is in place. Now what you're going to do is take the long end of your cordage and start wrapping it and actually weaving it between the other 3 poles that are going to make up the tripod. So you just put them close together and you go over, under every time that you pass this through. And it ends up working out really neatly and tight. And you want to make sure that all the slack is out of it, or at least as much as possible as you're doing this, because that'll make the end result a much stronger lash. And I'm going to do 3 passes for this. You can do more if you want it to be stronger. If the tripod's going to have to support some serious weight, you can do as many lashes as you want within reason, and it will increase the strength in the end. Okay, now that we have our weave complete, essentially, we're going to do what's called frapping, where we actually lash in between the strands that we've already made and pull it tight. So essentially, we're cinching all these logs together. We made our best effort to pull them tight on the first pass, and this really takes it to the next level and secures all these strands in place. And we go on to the next and final spot where we're going to do our frapping. Pulling it tight every time. Once I get 3 or 4 passes that are pulled really taut, I know that that's going to be good and strong. So now we're at the completion point where we can finish off the lashing. And there's a couple ways to do this. The fast, easy way is to pick up the tail that we started with from our clove hitch and just tie a couple of overhand knots, and that'll finish the lashing quite securely and strongly right there. But sometimes that's not a good idea because it can make the knot very difficult to untie later if you need to access the cordage. So what I'm going to show you as well is how to make a half hitch finish. In the half hitch finish, you just wrap around the log and then pass the long end underneath the wrap that you just made. And you do this a couple of times, and it will really finish it off quite securely, and it uses up all that excess length, but it also will come undone very easily if you need to access the cordage later. Okay, now we're ready to stand this tripod up. Okay, so check it out. I set up the tripod, and as you can see, I made my best effort to put each of the legs in as close to a perfect triangle as I could get. And now let's take a closer look at the lashing up close. As you can see, this is the center pole from our lashing, and here are each of the outer 2 poles. You want to make sure that the center pole is positioned underneath the outer poles, and this ends up making it work really well as far as having a lot of strength to the tripod. And also, if I were to use this setup, for example, for hanging a pot over a fire for cooking, I would hang the pot off of this middle pole because it's the one that's going to be the most strong, but it's also the one that's going to be dead center over the middle of the triangle and would consequently hang directly over the fire. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video on how to lash a tripod together, and I hope that it's added some knowledge to your set of skills. If you did enjoy this, be sure to check out the website at hedgehogleatherworks.com for a lot more information on wilderness survival. There is a section in there called the campfire that is loaded with information. So until next time, thank you so much for watching. I'm Paul Scheider from Hedgehog Leatherworks, and I'll talk to you soon.